very special episode of the Deadliest Warrior podcast. Woo! Joining us from the Fight Club, the Sim Master himself, Max Geiger. Max, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It's really cool. We were always trying to manifest getting Max Geiger on the show.
I'm just on the internet, right? It's very easy to find me.
Yeah. It's been like a joke since episode 1 for us. We're like, oh man, one day we're gonna get to talk. We're gonna get to talk to you, and here we are finally.
I think it's because you're like the main character of the show from a certain narrative perspective. So
yeah, for 2 seasons until they're like, get that guy out of here, get that other guy, all right, and then and the Navy SEAL, we gotta butch it up a little bit. So
right.
Well, I mean, to that point, I mean, one of the questions we wanted to ask you too is you were extremely young. Were you really 21 years old?
Yeah. I got into Deadliest Warrior. It was total luck, and it was just right out of college. So I weirdly enough, a casting call came through on my university's mailing list. So at the time I was going to USC's Interactive Media and Games program, right? Because I wanted to be a game developer, which is what my career actually wound up being. And I just answered this casting call and figured nothing came of it. And then it's got a job, moved to the Bay Area. I was doing all that. And I got this phone call. It was just so they want to shoot a pilot. Shot the pilot that spring. And then it was after I'd moved and all of that stuff, basically got the call, which is they like the pilot. They want to do the show. Come back. Right. So it's I stayed very graciously on my friend's couch for a couple of months. My job at the time was this, I was I was so worried about it, but it was this very entry level, I was basically a step above an intern for this startup, which was it was not going to go. but I was very worried about can I take some time away, a leave of absence to go do this thing? And they're yeah, right. sure, get out of here, right?
Yeah,
the guy who we were paying the least on the payroll, this is no sweat off of our back.
Yeah, everybody's first job where you show up and you got the tie, and your boss shows up and he's in a polo shirt, and you're all right.
yeah. No, it wasn't. Thankfully, it wasn't quite like that, but it was pretty close, right? So I crashed on a friend's couch for a few months while we were shooting the first season in LA, and that was that. Wow. So
yeah. How was it being a young man, 21 years old, and all of a sudden this show becomes the biggest show on Spike TV?
Well, it was weird because I don't know. That's an interesting question, because to be very clear, I was always co-host, right? It's me and Jeff and Dr. D, right? It's that trio is really what made things work, right? And then also I'm a dang cream puff, right? So they got all these dudes who are ripped as shit, ready to tear each other up, and it's just okay, I'm watching this man dismember the corpse of a pig over here, right? I'm definitely not going home feeling like I'm a big tough guy today, right? So there's never any of that.
And Jeff seems to be the Swiss Army man of careers, we've noticed. His resume just grows as the show goes on.
Well, that was the thing too, is that they were leaning in and trying to play to different people's talents and things like that. Dave Baker, weapons maker. There it is. That's
Dave Baker, the sword maker.
Yeah, exactly. Right. He started in sort of the prop shop for the show, right? And then was I actually know something about swords, guys. You might want to. And then they're okay, we're gonna lean into that, right? Because this guy knows what's up. So.
Yeah. You joked, I think this is before we started shooting, but how the editors had edited out a lot of the stuff you would say. Trust me, I think back to when I was 21. If I was on a major TV show, I would have been a million times more cringy. So it's almost surprising to believe that you were really 21.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a case. So I had a little bit of on-camera experience prior, and I think this is the thing that I practiced with or whatever, that it was just fate where I got this job where I worked basically like volunteered on like a show that was playing at USC, had a like a student run television network at the time. It was called The Cutting Edge, and it was basically like a Siskel and Ebert at the movies like thing. So it was me and my co-host was this woman named Veronica Flores, and like we like watched student films and then reviewed them, which is something I was not qualified to do at all, right? But but it was also like you could get like there was either like here's a graduate student's film which they actually like showed in a theater somewhere and are like trying to get an Academy Award for. You're like, whoa, that's awesome, right? And then it's like, and here's in like entry level, like, you know, this is like filmmaking 101. Like they gave you a camera and they're like, go make something, just get out of here, you know. And it's just like, oh wow, these are real rough, right? And so it's like I've like seen more like student films across that whole spectrum than probably most people, except for, you know, like film professors.
Yeah. And did you also like, because with this show, you seem to have like a general knowledge of history.
Oh, big time history buff. So okay. that was the other thing too. So it's, you know, I like double majored in classics a little bit, and like my like camera test was like just tell me about why the Spartans were awesome warriors, right? And I was like, okay, so we're just gonna like go and rant on that for a little bit. So
yeah,
was there any specific like warrior culture that you were like real into?
You know, I'm real interested in antiquity, but I think one of Mediterranean antiquity, but I think one of the really interesting things about the show is that like that well starts to run like dry pretty quick, unless you're like seriously into it. And it's like, oh, let's talk about like the differences in like equipment between like the hoplites of different city states and like different eras, right? It's just like, no, that's not going to fly on TV. All right, we're here to see something get blown up. All right.
Yeah.
So they had to like reach out and start talking about like different warrior cultures and martial traditions, you know, throughout the globe, right? So that's like a really interesting opportunity to learn about different things. Yeah,
probably one of the coolest aspects of the show is that you get a chance to learn about warrior cultures. And I know, you know, it's a TV show, so it's like a general knowledge, but I didn't know what a Rajput was. I didn't know what a Zonde was. And you watch the episode and it's like, I'm going to Google these guys and find out a little bit more.
How much of this is true, right? Like,
Which is where we started this podcast from.
Yeah, right.
Now, getting into like the production a little bit, we got to ask, as you people probably see at home, we are rocking the Max Geiger official suit jacket. I gotta ask, was that like a costume, or was that a personal style decision?
That was, well, so I thought that was pretty cool at like 20, right? As like a personal style decision. And I think I showed up for my camera test like that, right? And they're like, okay, we'll take that. We'll run with that, right? Like we got to get a little bit of layering, you know, going on there. And it's also like, you know, a little structure from the jacket. It kind of does a good job of like hiding that cream puffy nerd, you know, computer boy body. So
yeah, well, it's like your signature uniform. And it's funny seeing like you do these crazy weapons tests and these explosions in the desert. Right. And you're still rocking the suit jacket. It's such a funny visual.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was one episode where, what was it? It was like we had gone to the Nevada desert, like a little ways outside of Vegas, right? To shoot a couple episodes, you know, back to back, because it was like, all right, here we can do like automatic weapons much more easily than we could do in California for obvious reasons. And so like, it was like, it had like a call time of something like 5 a.m. or something, which means we had to be like on set. So it's like I had to wake up at like 3:30 in the morning or something like that, and like get in like the shuttle, and then we're like, you know, like driving out to where we were going to be shooting for the day. And I just remember it being like 4:30 in the morning in the desert, and it's like cold as shit. So the sun has not come up yet. I'm just like in my like little blazer and just feeling like the cold like coming in through like these sneakers that they had me wearing. And I was just like, this is bad. Just like standing by like craft services, just like slurping down like hot coffee, because it's like just the warmth alone was like the thing
just to hold it in your hands.
Yeah, exactly, right. Just you know.
Yeah, and I mean you keep it together pretty well. That was, I think we just watched, that was Somali pirate versus Medellin.
Yeah, with the biggest explosion.
Yeah, but I think you told a story somewhere, I forget where, that whenever you test the Granada in season 1 in the pirate episode, it was that exact scenario where you completely lost your mind at the Granada test because you were so sleep deprived.
Massive lateral lacerations. This guy
Well, I mean, the other thing too is that keep in mind for television, they want to get like a big reaction, right? Like part of our job as like co-hosts is to try and like play things up a little bit, right? So like everybody, you know, it's as much as you might be tempted to think like, all right, cool guys don't look at explosions, right? It's like, not cool guys, right? Like this isn't a movie. Like, you know, they're not going to make us look great as like individual characters. Instead, it's like we're there to be avatars for the audience and to get like hyped the fuck out at like, oh, that dude just cut that torso in half. That's some ghastly shit, right? Or sorry if I'm swearing too much here. You know,
we swear a lot.
You know, some of those explosions are just like, whoa, dude, like we're like up close and personal to that. So it's you know, sometimes it's just like indulge the reaction a little bit, like try and play it up a little bit. So
yeah, for sure.
So those shoots that took place like out in the desert, those got to be long and kind of brutal to film all day. What was like the normal day-to-day filming like that took place in the Fight Club? Were those also real long and brutal?
Those are long days. Those are less brutal. Like I mostly remember it getting really hot with all of the lights that were there, right? And you know, when you're shooting, it's not like you can run AC because it's going to mess with the sound, right? So it's you know, we'd all like go outside and, you know, chill out between takes and things like that.
What was the production schedule like during a season? Was it really fast paced, or
you know, having not like been like talent on different shows, right? I couldn't tell you to compare it to anything, you know. You know, I will certainly say that like as on camera talent, I think I had an easier time of it than, you know, like a lot of the production team who were the physical production team, like the art department, right? Who are like building the sets, like building the weapons and all of these things, putting it all together, right? Like those dudes oftentimes when it was like, okay, new season's going, like we gotta start getting this stuff like fabricated. Like it's like, all right, they were like working nonstop around the clock for like weeks prior before we started shooting. And then they were still like, you know, working super hard during each shoot, loading stuff in, loading stuff out. It's like my bit was just I had to show up early so that we could do makeup, get my blazer pressed a little steamed out, right? You know, and then you know, just leave at the end of the day. But it's like, you know, there are other people whose like whole job it is to like make all the rest of that happen, all the sets, right? And so it's they were working super hard.
Increasingly creative ways to destroy a ballistics gel or a
right. All right, how can we pack more explosives into this thing? You know,
yeah. I mean, we are probably going to talk about a lot of different aspects of the production here. You're the first person I've ever talked to, so I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff you either don't remember or you were not involved in. So
that's probably 110% correct. Like even when you guys were like, yes, this was the first I'd heard of the Zonde or the Rajput, I was like, oh yeah, I guess we did do that.
It's been so long.
So as for like the actual process of like kind of what your job was, like you do an explosion in the desert. I think in your AMA you mentioned that you do the data entry. You did it like at home, not really.
Oh my God, you've done your research.
Yeah, we read the AMA.
Yeah, we did like an episode on your AMA trying to
parse it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so like
read through the code. You know?
Yeah, like. Do you remember exactly, like, is it just like you had an explosive reading and you were entering that into like the program, or do you remember kind of what that was like actually entering that into like data?
Well, you know, we would get different data from different tests, right? So with something like an explosion, we might be looking at like pressure, you know, at a certain distance, and then like try and make inferences from that. But you know, it's not like any of us were like explosions or demolitions experts. We're just like, all right, this is exactly like what you need to look at to, you know, to quantify, you know, what a pound of gunpowder is going to do versus, you know, like 10 grams of C4 or something like that. So
right.
You know, to his credit, and you know, Jeff was the one who was taking most of the measurements. Like Jeff is a strong engineer, and you know, looked this stuff up, and you know, had like reference manuals. There's certainly a lot of like forensic reference manuals for things that are more like human scale rather than, you know, we're talking about the explosives, but you know, things like stab wounds or gunshots and things like that, like to try and understand like just how grisly those things are. And of course, Dr. D had a lot of firsthand experience, you know, with all that stuff, having, you know, been the head of like the emergency department that, you know, at his hospital for a while. So.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You use not just data on the show, but like forensic data of like wounds and things like that.
That's what you have to compare it to, right? Like it's you know, it's not like you know, the body of data that we're getting off the show is basically like an anecdote, like in any one instance, right? Like if you're going to do like a proper scientific like test, you would actually want to look at, you know, like the same thing tested over and over and over again, right? Try and build a body of data and understand, you know, patterns within it. So
right. and talking about, with, the tests themselves and everything, were all of these, because like with TV shows and movies in general, there's like you falsely believe everything's shot linearly. Were there any times where episodes were shot concurrently, where like okay, bring in the Zonde, okay, bring in the Qatar, or is everything kind of different?
Well, I think like I alluded to when like we went to Vegas, right? It's like, okay, like we gotta knock out like, the high powered weaponry for like all of the modern warriors, right? Or a good chunk of the modern warriors and a good chunk of those weapons, right? Over the course of like, I forget how long it was, but like a week or two, so.
Yeah, there's one particular background that looks like the Windows XP background. And another one, we did an episode where there's cows grazing for the chariot test.
I feel like it was a horse ranch almost.
Yeah. Some of that was, I want to say it was like the Pepper Tree Ranch or something like that. I'm forgetting the name. I could probably go and like look it up, but it was not too far north of Los Angeles, sort of by the Santa Clarita, like Six Flags-ish area.
Yeah,
just to ruin the magic for you, like a surprise, like filming in the Los Angeles film industry happens around Los Angeles.
We assumed all like the sim footage is like in a random field in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
sometimes like
right. The joke about it's like, oh, it's Griffith Park, right? Like everything,
right? Right. Sometimes like in the Viking episode, it's the same field, but the color temperature is way down. So there's little snow effects.
It's winter,
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. That field has never seen snow. Have you ever seen like those old like Hollywood maps, right? Of like, all right, so if you're gonna be shooting your picture, right? Like go here in California, double for like this part doubles for England, right? And this part over here is gonna be Spain, and like over here that's the tropics. Like go to that beach, that sort of thing. It feels like that a little bit sometimes.
Right.
So I'm sorry, you were gonna say, Matt.
I was just gonna ask, your on-screen talent. Did you have any say in the matchups, the weapons that got picked, or anything like that?
No, none of that. That was all like the story producers, and the producers who were working on the show. I think like occasionally, like at the beginning, I mean, there were only 2 seasons, and each season was run a little bit differently. I want to say at the beginning of season 2, there was some talk about it of like, hey, what do you think about these matchups? Right. Like, like weigh in, like if you've got like a better idea or something like that, you can do it, but not for picking individual weapons.
Sure.
I did scare the dickens out of one story producer once, where he was like very proudly like talking about like, I don't use Wikipedia for any of the research on my warriors or weapons. Right. And I was like, okay, that's good, because I've been editing Wikipedia to juice the results. And his face dropped. He just turned immediately ashen. And it's, I just had to let him know, like, no, dude, I don't have time to do that. That's a very long game we'd be playing. So.
Yeah, that's funny.
My follow-up to that was just going to be, one weapon seems to be particularly cursed. This is a fun question.
Okay, all right.
One weapon seems to be particularly cursed. Every warrior that gets the sling on the show, the kiss of death, the sling always gets like 1 kill, 2 kills.
Right.
I'm like, the producers must hate this weapon.
Were you guys funded by Big Sling?
Right. Big bow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, you got to keep in mind that a sling is like the least sexy like weapon that you could possibly pick for like TV. Like, it's like, and like if you think about what it is, like it makes a great deal of sense. Like in like antiquity, right? Like sling or a slingshot or something like that. It's like, all right, ammo's like plentiful, right? Like it's like rocks off of the ground, right? And it's and it a sling can actually do some damage. It's just like you got to spend a lot of time practicing with it. And it's much more effective in like massed fire, right? Like if you get like 100 dudes who are all throwing rocks over, at like a group of other dudes, like, that's something you want to watch out for, right? If it's just like one dude standing at the other end of the field, like whipping rocks at you semi-competently, right? He's not like a Balearic like island like slinger or something like that. It's like you could probably be like, all right, like this is gonna hurt quite a bit, and I hope I don't get beamed in the noggin, right? Like I don't want to get Goliath here or anything like that. But exactly, so. Yeah.
Was there any sporadic slingers on the set that misfired some rocks?
Oh my goodness. It's I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this. Things going terribly wrong, but like let's just say hypothetically, all right, like hypothetically, you're maybe a stunt player or somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of martial expertise, right? and you're kind of handed something, to practice with maybe a couple of hours before.
that was my next question. Is there a lot of experts we speculate this is their first time being introduced to a bow and arrow.
Yeah, that's our opinion. You know, we research all the experts, and we see a lot of them are like stunt actors that they bring onto the show, and so
I mean the thing about like all the actors, right, or you know, all of the other talents who's on the show, right, the other experts, right, is you can all look them up, and like who they are is a matter of public record, right? So like, there's you can do your research there and find out, you know, some of the experts that we had, like as like some of the experts we had all would go on to become like historical consultants, like for the show, and like consultants in technique, because they actually did care a great deal about like historical martial arts and technique and things like that, right? I'm thinking in particular of like Anthony DeLongis, right? Who you guys might remember, like that man was a prince and an expert, right? And also like, you know, like I would believe of like, you know, the sword fighters who are like currently walking around on this continent, like easily in the upper echelons, right, of those ranks, right? But you know, his job of like, I want to say being like I'm going to get the terminology wrong here, and I'm going to wind up with like a very angry email if somebody ever sees this, right? But of being like you know, like a stunt coordinator or working with like other stunt players, right? Like he'd seen plenty of times, and I'm not saying this is like a Deadliest Warrior thing. This is just like a general like industry thing, right? Like people will lie to get a job and be like, yeah, I absolutely know how to ride a horse, right? And it's like then get like cast in a Western, like a medieval thing, and they'll just be like terrified, like on horseback, like how do I what do I do with the animal, you know? So it's you know, there's a lot of that, right? Like people saying like, oh, I've got this particular expertise, which it's like, I've seen that in movies tons of times. How hard could that look, right? And it's like, well, it's actually very hard. People have careers figuring out how to do that, and then teach other people how to do that. So
it's always cool when we come across like legit experts on there, though, because there are a number of them that do appear on the show.
We've gotten pretty good sniffing it out, we feel. One of our segments is we always have an entire thing about each expert where we try to do as deep of a dive as we can. Sometimes there's absolutely nothing, and then we get in some crazy websites trying to Google you know
who somebody is. But then other times you get Anthony DeLongis, where it's like, oh, hey, this guy, we're proud to report, legit, easy to find, check him out.
Barry Jacobson too.
Extreme real deals there, you know. Barry was one of the folks who became sort of like a consultant for the show, right, because of his knowledge of, you know, various martial cultures.
He's next. He was Max Geiger was always our number one.
Just dial him up. I'm sure you guys can find him.
We got the clout.
We're gonna track him down.
I mean, on the topic of experts, were there any that you were surprised were really down to earth, and were there any that you were legitimately very terrified of?
Legitimately very terrified. I don't know if I was ever like in like fear of a specific person. There were definitely times where like we had one extra. I won't say, you know, who or anything like that. Probably also because I don't remember the guy's name, right? But like at one point it was like apropos nothing that like we just like broken like the scene, and he like turned to me and was like, "How about you? Do you have any Jew blood in you?" And I was like, what? Where is this going?
Oh my God.
Oh, no. I was saying not one of the Nazi experts. So
okay,
that was my first thought.
Yeah, exactly, right. But it was not who you would expect. It was just like, this is a very weird question. So
yeah. Do you remember any like real kick-ass expert? They were like, oh, this guy's like really cool.
Well, I mean, you know, the ones that we talked about, right? Yeah. And then there were a number of like other experts who were just like very, very down to earth and like fun to talk to, and you know, we're doing interesting stuff.
What about the Spetsnaz guys? What were they like?
Oh, that's a tough one, right? Yeah, Sonny, and I'm trying to remember.
We should know. We've talked about them. Sonny,
Maxime Franz.
Yeah. No, they were interesting characters, I would say, and they definitely they had a lot to teach, and their teaching methods were very interesting. So.
Yeah,
a lot of fun researching them.
But Sonny, I can say is definitely like the real deal, right?
Oh yeah. We found a ton of videos and stuff of both of them doing knife and gunplay.
Yeah. And getting back into production a little bit, do you have any idea what the show's pig budget was?
The pig budget?
Yeah. Because there are a lot of times we always joke that like I see this pig that just gets completely wasted by Hollywood to see what it would happen if we hit it with a baseball bat. And how many people could have been fed by that pig? So I'm curious.
That was a common remark, right? Of like, like we could be having some real good barbecue here, but instead we're doing this, right? But I will say pigs are cheaper than ballistic gel torsos, right? And so like, I believe that there's got to make,
Yeah, we were trying to get a ballistic gel for the set, and it was like, maybe in a bit. I think we were looking at $2,000. Yeah,
maybe. Oh, I mean, you can make your own, but you're going to be there like pouring Jello for a long time.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably why some of the tests at home kids already have some stab wounds before the test. I'm gonna assume the production, but and this is another thing that I figure I just asked, but I doubt you may have something to do with. Maybe you do.
Throw it out there, man. Come on.
Okay. For like we were also fascinated by like the editing of the show and how it's put together. Mm-hmm. Do you have any insight into that, especially considering one of the episodes, the total kills don't even add up to 1,000? Like, it's something that
it's the back for blood one with Spetsnaz IRA.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest where we're like, what the hell is going on? And there's weird inconsistencies as well. Mm-hmm. Were you ever privy to anything from that side of putting an episode together?
No, it was interesting because like I did remember like talking to story producers, right? And like a story producer has a very interesting job in reality TV, right? Where oftentimes they'd be in their interviews they'd be like, well, what did you think about? And then they would ask you like a very loaded question, which would basically like if you were answering it like a normal person, you would say like, oh, I thought when so and so did such and such, that was a terrible thing, right? And it's like, and then from that they can like mine the sound bite that they need, right? There were definitely some instances where like some Frankenbites got put together where it's like, okay, these are like different things that are sort of strung together, but it's like, okay, it's like they gotta make the show, right? They gotta tell the story, and I think the thing that I said and have said before is like the only thing that's fake about reality TV is that it's like reality at all. So,
yeah.
Now, Max, I gotta ask. Because a lot of people, it seems like the trend that if you're on a TV show, you don't actually watch the show. Did you actually watch Deadliest Warrior when it was premiered?
I did watch the first 2 seasons, and was like also surprised by things. I think it was like there was like we had what was it SWAT versus GSG9, and that had like the Popeyes like super kill break, like where it was like this weird like sponsored by Popeyes chicken. Here's a shotgun doing some stuff, and it was
that was a famous cut. Yeah, I remember.
So like there would definitely be like surprises that would make their way like into the final cut, right? And it's I was certainly very grateful to the editors of the show for it's like we were like friends on Twitter, and so I was like, oh, thanks man for like making me not look like an enormous doofus like in this moment, just like a medium doofus, and that's fine, so.
Have you watched it again at all recently? Have you watched it since then?
I have not. I actually don't know where my DVDs are, and I think they only did a DVD of the first season. Yeah. Is it like streaming on like it's like Amazon Prime?
Amazon.
You have to give Lord Bezos your hard.
Right. Yeah. I got to pay $3 for each episode in HD, and I got to pay $3 for the aftermath. And you know what? I still do it because
you're paying for the. They got you paying for the aftermath. Like yeah. That takes me. I see Kieran Elliott. That man was a gentleman. So he was great to work with.
Yeah, nothing against Kyrian. It's just like it's a 20-minute like.
I remember watching that in my pajamas in the morning after the episode on my mom's computer for free on Spike TV.
Yeah,
and now I got to pay $3 for it.
That's how they get you, right? It's like they sell your pass back to you. So.
Yeah. Well, do you want to get into like the sim maybe?
Yeah, we didn't write too many specific questions about the sim, but I guess since you're here, we just got to ask you.
You got to do it. It's
Is the sim real?
Yeah.
Is the sim real?
I will definitely say there was some simulation software. Yes.
Because
numbers go into computer, numbers come out of computer, right? Accuracy of that process and the accuracy of the numbers going into said computer. Well, I mean, you watch the show. So
I'm really glad to hear you say that because that was sort of our
part of our journey.
Yeah, that was our deduction ultimately was like our hypothesis, I guess, was like, I feel like there is a sim, but if not everything that they're testing is super accurate or
apples to apples, even.
Right? Yeah. Whatever's popping out the other side, it is what it is.
There's an old saying, in computer science, right, which is garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. A lot of stuff like footwork. which the show says is in there, I have a feeling was a little difficult to put into data. Matt, you've always described yourself as a sim agnostic, so I think this is a big this is a big moment for you. So
it's nice. It's nice to look upon the face of the sim. You know?
I mean, was there anything about the sim that you wish people understood but you don't think came across in the show?
I mean, so part of the reason why I did the show, aside from it seeming like it was going to be fun, is that it did actually seem like it seemed like it was going to be like Frosted Flakes or something, right? Where it's like, yeah, there's like a lot of junk and a lot of sugar, but there's like a kernel of nutritional content in there, right? Like with like the historic stuff, or maybe with like some of the science stuff. Like I was hoping that we get to be like the Mythbusters for Mayhem, right? Even though the Mythbusters were, leagues ahead of what we were doing. And so I was hoping that people would learn like a little bit more about the scientific process. And so I wish that we'd had like a little bit more time to get into some of the science and some of the engineering behind these things, in addition to like the history around these things, right? And like the measurements like derived from that, and the scientific techniques that that like Jeff would use in order to measure some of the things that were happening. Like all of that stuff was like very cool, and getting into the science behind it was I think one of like the redeeming like values of the show. And so I wish that we'd been able to do more of that. So.
Is it Slytherin Studios or Slytherin Strategy?
At this point, I have no idea. I have to go look them up like online. It's been a long time, but I know they're real. They actually do make games. They've been making a go of it for some years now. They've got like their audience of enthusiasts. So
yeah, our buddy Brent over there, he's a big Warhammer guy. You said they make a Warhammer game? Battle Sector, so that's pretty big. Got the Warhammer license. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, Games Workshop will give out that Warhammer license. It feels like to anybody these days. Like they've figured it out.
Hey, listen, don't besmirch Slytherin strategies, okay?
Oh no, not on them, right? Yeah. Like I got the Warhammer license right here. I'm going to go make a thing. No.
I guess continuing just with a sim, this is a question that's been burning in my mind for a little bit. So obviously the initial idea is that it's a one-on-one fight, Viking versus samurai, one-on-one 1,000 times. And when you get into modern weapons, it's like 5-on-5. And I guess I was always curious about,
well, there's a story reason for that, which is right. Exactly. It's we're done.
Is there, can you tell us a little bit about how the different inputs like went with that? Like,
I honestly don't. I don't.
Say, is there a primary? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's lost to the mists of time. So. I think the hard drive that I have that might have all of that stuff on it is like seized up, like in, like an old, like
buried in the Spike TV grave.
Yeah. So yeah.
Do you remember at all, and this is another one maybe a little specific, but like when it came to squad on squad combat, how the kills work? Because with squad v squad, the kills would be more than 1,000. Is it like the final kill of the sim?
I honestly don't remember the rationale, because I remember that like I would basically like get numbers right and like send numbers over to production, and as you guys pointed out, like there would sometimes be discrepancies, right? I don't remember if that's like my flub or if that's production's flub, so I'm going to take this rare opportunity to throw somebody else under the bus, right? And say like somebody else typed the wrong thing in like in After Effects like text field as they were rendering something out. So
guys, Max is not responsible for Green Beret's Petsnet. You guys need to
I'm killing him.
I probably am, but I would like to blame somebody else. So
looping back kind of in the realm of matchups, was there any episode that was kind of like proposed that ended up not happening? Like it almost made it to filming per se, and then just the episode was kind of scrapped?
I think there was a plan at some point to do more episodes in season 2, and there were more like hypothetical matchups there, but then those got like bashed together or scratched for whatever reason, budgetary reasons. But I don't actually remember that. Like I could be confabulating that as well too. So, and I don't know about like the other seasons after my tenure on the hallowed halls of the Fight Club.
So to transition a little bit of after season 2, you have a departure from the show. And I know one of the main reasons you gave was to work on and produce the Unfinished Swan video game, which I actually, to prepare for this, I went back and replayed.
We checked it out. Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, good on you. Yeah.
And that was Sony Santa Monica Studios, if I'm correct. Were you working?
Giant Sparrow. We were being incubated by Sony Santa Monica. So, which is, it was a very cool setup, and it was very similar to what they'd done with that game company a few years prior, who were the people who made like Flow and Flower, things like that. Journey was like the really big one that they had, and then they've just recently come out since like leaving that. They had a 3-game incubation deal, and then they sort of left, did their own thing, and they're doing a thing now called Sky Children of Light. Which is good. You should check it out if you're interested in that, and like their general vibe. Sorry, I'm just like here, like, let me give you some game recommendations. That's what I'm talking
Go
about.
ahead.
It's like the most like peaceful,
about,
like chill thing too. It's like in stark contrast.
We know you work in the game industry, and we're all gamers, and we do some of that on our other. We talk about some of that on our other podcasts. Yeah. So
a lot of those seem to have like a similar, cool, artsy, like fun vibe, like with Journey and Flower and Unfinished Swan as well. So I'll have to check that out too.
Did you get to work with the God of War guys at all? Because that's the same company.
Yeah. Actually, if you look in the credits, well, I mean, we were in the offices with the God of War guys, right? And so we talked to them. Like, I talked to producers on the God of War team. I actually had wonderful advice from Yumi Yang, who would like go on to be, I think one of the executive producers on the most recent God of War game. And she gave me some of like the best advice I've ever had in my career, like stuff that I'm still using to this day, right? It was a tremendous opportunity, and they actually were able to help us out in a couple of spots. I like to give a shout out to like Richard Greenspan and Mehdi Yusuf, who like saved us with like some effects work and some like animation work, and we were able to tap into like some of Sony's like outsourced animation outsourcers, so some of that capability and like their QA team who are really good too. So it was a really great opportunity for like our small company to have the support of like this larger company in those ways.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. In terms of your departure, like was there anything besides producing the Unfinished Swan that might have influenced your decision to leave, or was it that you saw this really cool opportunity to produce a game and that was kind of your main driving force?
My heart had always been in games, right? And like part of the reason why I went to do Deadliest Warrior anyways is that I thought there would be an opportunity to get involved with like it. Obviously, it was like there's that word like from the 80s, right, which is like things could be like toyetic, which is like I think it was like Hasbro like used it for like marketing. That I'm of course probably butchering the history of this thing, where it's like you look at this thing and it has like the potential to be a toy, right? Well, like if you look at like Deadliest Warrior, it has like very obvious potential to be a game, right? And I was like hoping to be involved like in the game, and unfortunately like that just didn't pan out. It wasn't like a consideration in anybody's minds, right? So I was a little bit, frankly, I was a little bit disappointed by that, with with too much ego for and so I was, if I'm speaking my truth here, it's like I was a little hurt by that there wasn't more consideration given towards like being able to be like involved with that game, which was of course I'm sure like the last thing on anybody's minds when there's like $1 to be made, right? Not like, oh, this little guy's career over here, and I think the Pipeworks folks like who actually did make the Deadliest Warrior game, like I think they did a good job, right? Like a lot of people like who play the game are like, yeah, this is good, this is some fun, like,
it's like surprisingly deep.
They worked hard on it, and it's like a little labor of love. Like it's awesome what they were able to do. So
I remember being surprised that you weren't involved when I was a kid. When I first got it, I was like, Max isn't like on this. Like,
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's like just like put me on a sticker or something and slap me, on the thing, right? Or like, hey, let's pick up the phone and like get the Slytherin folks involved or something.
Yeah, like John Madden, but Max Geiger's Deadliest Warrior, the game.
You know what, dude? I'm here 110% for it. So like, if anybody watching this has like a bright idea and like a line on funding, like I will absolutely like John Madden, like whatever your video game is. So we'll throw it in the Max Geiger Presents like pile. So
now after you left and season 3 kind of moved on with what it did, did you have any opinion kind of towards the end when they went on to what was it, Zombie versus
I know, I'm sure you can't talk too much about season 3 because you weren't involved, but did you feel any type of way that the last episode Deadliest Warrior was Zombie versus Vampire?
I think it was an interesting concept that they were going to like start branching more into the fictional world, right? But I think it was perhaps just like a bridge too far from like the original, like, oh, there's like a kernel of like science and a kernel of history in these things, right? And we could talk about like the cultural and historical bases for like different fictional characters and why that might make them interesting. But now like we're making a very very different show from like OG Deadliest Warrior, right? But it's like the folks that they were able to get, like I think they were able to get like Max Brooks, right, for like the zombie side of things. That dude's sharp, right? Like he's doing good stuff, right? So it's I think they tried to have fun with it, like anything else.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't remember the episode. We're obviously gonna rewatch it, but like to boil into the cultural aspect of where, like, what are the roots of these stories, I think could have been interesting. I don't remember if they did that or not, but I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Well, it's like we had done Vlad the Impaler, right? Like, and so it's like we've done Vlad the Impaler, and now you're gonna go and you're gonna do a Dracula, like
the vampire. Yeah.
And sort of when it comes to episode ideas or matchup ideas, there's obviously some controversial ones like IRA, Taliban, and Nazi versus Viet Cong, and it's tough for us to put our finger on it, but we get a vague sense that the hosts, maybe yourself included, we're a little uncomfortable with the concept of some of these matchups.
There's some definite dis-ease there, right? I think we were like a little bit uncomfortable, right? And it's at the same time, there's also like an aspect of it where it's like you still want to do like a job and like you still want to do like a good job, but like it does sit weirdly with you, like especially because it's like as your host or something in reality TV, you're not actually like yourself, right? But it's your name and it's your face, and it's like it's hard for people to understand that it's like that's maybe not exactly like who you are in real life, right? Yeah. And so like it's like, and so I'm thinking about it, right? And like I think it was in the IRA Taliban episode, right, where like they were like lighting up some dummies with a flamethrower, and there's like a hard cut to me just like laughing my head off like a jackal, right? And it's just like it's like I saw that and I'm like, this is not good. Like it's like I don't want to be that person, and I don't want people to think I'm that person. I'm pretty sure that's not who I am, even like if at the moment I'm just like I'm giddy as hell because it's like I haven't slept a whole lot. We're like on the third day of shooting at the bottom of
it's someone torching mannequins with a flamethrower. It is cool to watch.
Yeah. But then it's like when you think about what it's supposed to be, it starts to get a little uncomfortable, right? And so like I think with that one is I had spoken up to the production team. I was like, look, I'm a little uncomfortable about this. Like, I'm going to make like a donation, to the UN fund for like cleaning up landmines, right? And like the production team was like, that's a good idea. Like, we'd actually like to like match that, and that's where like that little like splash card at the beginning of the episode came from. So, but yeah, there's definitely some where it's like, is this towing the line between like understanding and glorifying, right? And what do you do, about that line? So.
Yeah, it was a different time, and we actually asked ourselves
like 2009. Which feels like 4 lifetimes ago.
Exactly, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, I don't think that episode would exist now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, and it's crazy to think.
I think it would have been done in a very different way now. So
right,
it's definitely the sort of thing where it's like after we did, it's like, okay, any career in politics, like we're gonna write that off.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's.
Although nowadays with like the actual evil that like people are doing, like you can get away with anything. Never mind. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Craig, you're trying to make a good point. So,
well, no, it's all good. I mean, we joked that like it's sort of foreshadowing now on the aftermath. Kieran was like, yeah, we thought this would be a controversial episode, but there's a lot of like these young boys who are totally okay with this Nazi episode. And now we fast forward to 2022.
Like
there's some hindsight.
It's just even amazing to me where it's like we had like, like growing up, it's like, oh yeah, Nazis would have played out like villain, like, like in your video game. Right. And it's like, it was like, there was like the Wolfenstein reboot that happened, I want to say in like 2015 or something like that. It was like, okay, all right. Like, yeah, this is a little excessive, but like they're doing a fun thing with a cliche, and now it's just like, oh wait, no, the Nazis they're back and they're real. Right. Oh, and it turns out we were having a hard time getting rid of them in this country. Like this is
and Bethesda caught shit for making a game about that, which is unreal. Like so.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like
especially, I think they tried to put a lot of contemporary like anti Nazi themes in those games from when I played it. So.
Yeah, it was a while ago for me too, but
So now that we're talking post Deadliest Warrior and into like the realm of video games, so we know that you were a producer on the Unfinished Swan. What are some other projects you've been working on, or what are you working on currently?
Well, I'm at a company called Magnopus currently, and I can't really talk about like what Magnopus's projects are, but there's some interesting stuff. We actually did a project recently called Expo Explorer, which was for the Dubai World's Fair, the Dubai World's Expo, which was actually Expo 2020, but I don't know if you guys have been, like watching the news at all, but some stuff happened in 2020, and so they had to delay it a little bit. Right. So they're just like, hey, everybody come, like fly to Dubai and participate in this amazing thing. So that got pushed to 2021, and it was a very interesting project, which was about like the synthesis of what we call a digital twin, where we basically cloned like the physical location and turned that into a virtual location, right, and then filled that with all kinds of game and interactive media content. You can actually like download it and check it out on your phone now. Although I might be saying the wrong thing because the expo wrapped at the end of March, and I'm going to go double check on what's going on with that. So
we'll find out.
Yeah, you guys can find out. Yeah. I don't know what I'm allowed to say or not say about potential future for something like that. So
yeah, well, I'll say this. I mean, we checked out your LinkedIn a little bit, and as you've mentioned, I think on there that you worked in traditional, regular 2D games, AR, VR. Mm-hmm. What is that like, kind of moving to these different types of planes that don't necessarily have the same rules established that a traditional like 2D game does?
Well, it's interesting because like a lot of what we brought, so I got really into VR, right? Facebook's acquisition of Oculus happened. What was that, like 2014 or 2015? I'm getting muddy on the timeline here, right? But that happened, and that kicked off like a second like boom for VR at that point, right? And I think the thing is that a lot of us who'd been in games or interactive media before then brought like the whatever literacy we had about like how games work and how that interactive media works to VR. And there's parts of it that were like, okay, this can be used as part of like a common vocabulary, and then there are other parts of it where it's like, oh, you got to just like completely throw that out, right? And there's doing things in VR that are just like much more difficult to do because it's so much more immersive and so much more like it has to be real or feel closer to real if you want it to make sense to a human being. Where it's like we'll be here for the rest of like our 8 minutes that we've got. It's path, right? But it's like the difference between like going from, I'd say it's like the difference between going from like set design for like a movie to like architecture, right? Where there's like, it has to stand up and look good from certain angles and you can cheat some things, to suddenly like the building itself has to actually work, right? And be functional. And that's kind of like the difference between going from 2D games to like virtual reality or augmented reality.
Right. And I think one of the biggest things that blew my mind, I read an interesting article about VR, and one of the things they point out is that a first person shooter, the red line indicates where you're being shot from. It doesn't make any sense out of context, but everybody knows what that means.
Right. It's just sort of the common language, right? And it's like, we've got to
be in the frontier of that and develop that common language for future VR developers, I imagine.
Yeah, it's exciting, but there's also like, you get to do a lot of weird stuff that's going to go on the dustbin of history. So.
Yeah. Right.
All right. You guys want to do our last 3 questions here, Craig? You want to kick us off?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder sometimes if you and Jeff and the other hosts realize how big of a deal Deadliest Warrior was. Like, whenever we told people that we were doing this podcast, yeah, everybody had a connection with it, and they're like, oh yeah, like, that's awesome. Does this like hold a special place in your heart, or is this just another checkbox and like, oh yeah, I did that thing?
I will always look back on it, fondly. There are definitely parts of it that I'm going to look back on like not fondly. And like the ability, like the fact that it did touch so many people and like have an impact on so many people, even if it was just dudes being bros, like I think is a cool thing, right? Like it was a fun thing to be part of like the zeitgeist for a moment, right? With Deadliest Warrior.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I think, fortunate in some ways it didn't like blow up and get bigger than it was. And it's like sort of like quietly go and like live the rest of my life, right? Where it's like,
yes.
Oh yeah. So what did you do at the beginning of your career? And I can just be like, oh, I worked in television. Right. And like, if they probe a little bit deeper, sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, I worked on the show called like Deadliest Warrior. And like invariably they're like, oh, that's interesting. It's like reality TV or whatever. And then occasionally like, dude, that like my roommate and I got high and we watched that show. It's just, and I was like, yeah. So that was an interesting time,
Yeah, I think I realized that more than just us watched it. There was a viral tweet. I hope you saw it. It was one of the funniest things I've ever read. It was like, Oh, I remember when I used to come home from middle school and watch Deadliest Warrior, where they would have Al Capone versus the 1927 New York Yankees. And I realized that like this show is, I think, a part of our generation. And
Yeah.
We were the perfect age when this show came out.
The show for men was very much like all boys in like middle school. So
Now, Max, do you still keep in touch with anyone from the show?
You know, I'm still in occasional contact, although it's been a while, and I should probably reach out, you know, to all of those people whose names and right. But you know, probably Jeff and Dr. D, right?
oh, I love that. That's awesome.
Yes.
So I mean, it's been a while since I've like had a chat with either of them, but I think they're both doing well, you know, and it's, you know, everyone's busy, you know, with their lives. And I actually a few months back had a conversation with Tim Prokop, who was the showrunner for season 1. So it's you know, everyone's busy, but like it's still there, like it's still like we all did this thing, we're all sort of to misuse the metaphor, in the trenches together to like try and get the show on. So.
That's very cool. Yeah, I feel like Deadliest Warrior does have a bit of a legacy because it's such a unique show. Like, I don't know if...
Oh, my friend, have you ever heard of Animal Face Off?
No. I haven't heard of Animal...
Because it was like, let's do the like Animals Deadliest Warrior.
2 natural-born killers. The lion is the terror of the African plains, a fearless fighter. Its cousin, the tiger, is a lone assassin, a silent stalker.
Who is Deadliest?
Okay.
Oh, it's like we're obviously not going to put like a bear and a shark like in a shallow swimming pool, right? So it's like let's build robots instead that like emulate their bite.
Okay, so
like that is a guilty pleasure. That one's just for you to enjoy a little bit later.
That might be after we finish season 3.
Next podcast.
Yeah, Animal Face Off.
Did you have any keepsakes from the Deadliest Warrior show that you still hang on to?
Somewhere in the back of a closet, it was like a foam skull that somebody had really excavated with like a shotgun slug at one point. And I don't know if I still have it or if I was like looking at it during a move and was just like, it's time to go, friend. Like we've got to, and then like, it's like, I had, I think like some spent brass here or there, but I don't have it. So no, now I feel sad and empty to have turned my back on that, that part of my history. So I might have something in a box somewhere, but I don't remember. So
well, they probably weren't going to let you walk off set with like a fully automatic rifle.
Can I have a hand grenade? It's like it's very very Anchorman, right? Like Brick, where did you get a hand grenade?
I'm taking these guys.
Now, Max, I got 2 more personal style questions for you.
Sure.
And one's pretty much a layup for you. We hear that you are an advocate of the man bun post trend. Yeah. Could we get a sneak
Well, I mean, that's like in my Twitter bio, right? Like some stuff. Yeah. This is it was a slight like Deadliest Warrior rebellion too, where it's like I had to get my like weird like hair like cut to look to be consistent specifically. So I was like I'm just growing it out, right? So.
And I got one deep dive question for you.
Go for it, because we got like 2 minutes, so make it count.
Did you win a decathlon in high school in 2003?
I am a national champion for the academic decathlon. So
that is awesome.
I was in the varsity, one of the varsity slots for my team. And I think probably at that point had been like one of the like highest scoring people at the time. So yes, I do have some
big deal.
like nerd cred in that regard. What came out of that was our team got to go meet our congressperson at the time, got us to meet George W. Bush, and we got to meet him, and we later learned that was the day that U.S. forces had capped Uday and Kusai, so he was in a very good mood, but we didn't know that was why. And I will also remember that the person who got to see the president before us was a gentleman from Texas who made cowboy hats by turning stumps on a lathe.
Okay.
W was
back to follow up.
Right. Yeah.
So you got like your like 13 high schoolers, right, who have put themselves through a rigorous academic like a competition, right, and then a man making our wooden cowboy hats, right? So there you go. Priorities.
All right. I guess we can close out here with our final question.
Yes or no?
Ready? Yeah. Right. Yes or no question. Max, when we become multimillionaires someday and we buy the rights to Deadliest Warrior and we revive the show, can we get you to show up as a host?
Give me a call. We'll talk. Let's talk. But Papa Bird's got to wet his beak. I'm going to need a little bit more background participation.
Sure,
That's fair.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Max. We really appreciate it, man.
It was a privilege to meet you.
Yeah.
Get to ask you some questions.
Yes. All right.
Anyone want to promote while you're here? Anyone want to promote while you have you here for this last minute?
I think I did my bid for King and Country, name checking, the thing that I could name check from my current employer. I'd love to hype some more stuff, but instead I got to play like that old like Hollywood, like chestnut. I got numerous projects in various stages of development, right? As it would be. So Mork, Loris, Grom, very nice to meet you guys. No, Craig, Matt, Lucas, very nice to meet you guys, and good luck with the podcast. And you guys could get like Barry Jacobson or call up Jeff or something like that. Get some more folks on. You guys can do it. I believe in you.
All right, that'll be good.
That's all the encouragement we need. I'm ready to run through a brick wall.
I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, thanks, gents.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Max.
Take care.
All right. Have a good one. Stay safe.
Yep.